Good afternoon and welcome to the third concurrent session of the day, Strategies for Orchestrating a Comprehensive Math Learning Center when using online and hybrid formats. Our presenters today are Kelly Coltis and Tyler Price from University of Louisville. Professor Kelly Coltis is an academic coordinator for REACH Math Resources at the University of Louisville. She serves as an instructor and course administrator for the Gen 103 and 104 program and coordinates the Summer Calculus Preview program. Professor Coltis has worked for REACH Math Resources since 2013, and she taught high school mathematics for 5 years prior to joining REACH. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Mathematics teaching from Purdue University, Fort Wayne, and a Master's of Education in Counseling and Personnel Services with a concentration in school counseling from the University of Louisville. She married her wonderful husband, Tyler, in March of 2019. Professor Tyler Price is a program coordinator for REACH Math Resources at the University of Louisville. In this role, Professor Price serves as an instructor and course administrator for the Gen 103 and 104 program, as well as a math tutor manager. He has a Bachelor's of Science in Economics and a minor in Mathematics, and he is currently pursuing graduate work in mathematics. He is married to his college sweetheart, Brandy, and has 2 ridiculously large horse dogs. If you have any questions for the presenters during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenters.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Maybe. There we go. There we go. Well, thank you so much for being here. I know everybody is very busy, so we appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon. And thank you, Julia, for such a warm introduction. An overview of our presentation is that we'd like to give you some context just so you're familiar, maybe a little more familiar with our university and REACH, which is our academic support unit where Tyler and I both work. We're going to talk about our Math Resource Center, tutoring and summer bridge programs, our Emporium Math Lab, which is where we teach our intervention courses in math, lessons learned, some challenges and lessons we learned from fall 2020, and some changes that we've made and implemented through the spring 2021 semester, some results of our REACH programs, and we'll save some time for discussion, thoughts, and questions. So without further ado, the University of Louisville is a state-supported research university in Louisville, Kentucky. There's about 600,000 people in Louisville, probably about 1 million in the broader area. We have about 22,000 students, about 70% are white and 30% minority. And we teach on Louisville's Belknap campus, which is the main campus where most of the colleges are located. REACH stands for Resources for Academic Achievement. We are the academic support unit for undergraduate students at U of L. We provide tutoring service, student success workshops, and intervention courses. And all REACH tutoring services are free to students. So just kind of a little bit about the numbers. In the 2018-19 academic year, we served more than 5,000 unique students for a total of about 76,000 contact hours. And we tutored over 70% of the 2018 cohort in at least one course, and many use multiple courses. We offered more than 14,000 hours of mathematics tutoring through our Math Resource Center. And in the years since then, the numbers have been similar, and we'll kind of talk about those formats here in a bit. We help students achieve an 88% ABC pass rate and a 94% overall pass rate. So we're very proud of that. Reach professional and paraprofessional staff, just the numbers of kind of who's all running the show. Reach has 14 full-time professional staff members and 13 graduate student assistants, and our GAs work 20 hours a week. We also employ approximately 150 tutors each semester, and tutors start at $10 an hour and can go up to $11.50 an hour depending on their experience and certification level. And our tutor training program is certified by the College Reading and Learning Association. So types of tutoring provided by Reach, training, I'm sorry. We do have face-to-face training, obviously not very much of that going on right now. We do have some very small group training, like even this afternoon, we're gonna have some math training with some of our math tutors, but it's going to be approximately 8 people in a room that would normally hold about 50. We do a lot of online training, both synchronous and asynchronous, and we provide makeup training. This is a really nice picture, and it obviously happened pre-COVID, so just thought I'd take a note of that. And we talk a lot about policies and procedures, tutoring, CRLA topics, best practices, current research, and we do a lot of content training with our math tutors. So I'll hand it over to Tyler for the Math Resource Center.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for being here today. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we do in our Math Resource Center. So this is our kind of primary drop-in tutoring center for math at the university. We tutor all courses from pre-algebra up through Calculus 2. We have seating for approximately 50 students, even though that would be a little cozy in there. And obviously that number is down since the pandemic. We offer currently in-person tutoring, and that is capped at 15. That's kind of the most we can get in there with the social distancing regulations. Also, we have an online component to our tutoring center that we'll talk about in a little bit more depth here shortly. So kind of how the online tutoring center works, we personally use Microsoft Teams here at U of L. The kind of main benefit or reason we might do that is because all students have a Microsoft Office Suite account already with their, or for being students. We decided to create a separate channel for each one of our supported courses. So students will go into Microsoft Teams, they'll find our MRC drop-in tutoring team, and then they'll post a question in the channels that you can kind of see off to the right there. We have tutors monitor those channels just using notifications through Teams, and they are pretty quick to get to questions. Usually it's around 2 minutes or less, unless we're really busy or having kind of a lot of students at once. We do tutoring through the interactive whiteboard feature that's in Teams or through Microsoft OneNote. And then, you know, in the case where maybe our tutors don't have the technology, but usually they do, we also will use a physical whiteboard or paper pencil. Some of the useful Teams features that we found while tutoring, there's live captioning, obviously the recording feature, which can be good if you might get the same question multiple times. Again, that interactive whiteboard is useful. It kind of allows tutors and students to work collaboratively. And also we keep a private channel where we post our kind of review sheets and any updates for our MRC tutors. So it's kind of in one centralized place. For the fall 2020 and spring 2021, we did both online and in-person tutoring concurrently throughout most of the day, with some additional hours kind of offered online up until 8 p.m. And then of course with the pandemic, we've had a little bit reduced use. So we have a kind of smaller staff, both in person and online throughout the day. Another big component of what we do here in Reach Math Resources is our summer bridge programs. All of those were moved fully online for 2020 and 2021. Math Accelerator is a new program that we started just a couple years back. It allows students to come in and complete the first half of our intervention course over the summer free of charge. We have the Brown-Forman Engineering Academy. That's a program we do for incoming engineering students who receive a kind of scholarship from Brown-Forman. They come in and we kind of get them ready for their first calculus course at the university. And then that's pretty similar to our calculus preview program as well, but that is not limited to people who were chosen by Brown-Forman. Anybody can enroll in this program that's an incoming engineering student. And then we have this chart here for those of you who might manage a math tutoring center yourself. This is just kind of our plan that we had for fall 2020. You can kind of see there the differences amongst the face-to-face, online, and hybrid formats. So I won't, necessarily read all these to you, but if you'd like these slides, I believe we can share these afterwards. But the big points here are just our kind of reduced staffing levels compared to normal volume, and our hours, kind of the extended online hours that we have above and beyond our in-person capacity. We found it's easier to kind of staff online because people can work from home rather than coming into campus.
Okay, and now I'm going to talk about our Emporium Math Lab, which physically in our building is located directly next door to our Math Resource Center. So this is the computer lab that we use to teach the university's intervention courses in algebra. These are 3 credit hour courses, and they're elective credits. They have a Gen STEM instead of a Math STEM in our course catalog. We grade them pass fail, and there are 36 student workstations in this classroom or this math lab. We teach 2 classes. Gen 103 is special topics for non-STEM majors. We use that term fairly loosely at U of L, but essentially it's a pre-algebra and basic algebra content type class for students who only need to go one step further to a basic math or a quantitative reasoning course. Or it could lead them into Gen 104. Students could start at either Gen 103 or Gen 104, no matter where they're going to end up. Gen 104 is for our STEM majors. Again, we use it probably a little more loosely than some schools, but essentially this is any class that needs to go to college algebra or beyond. Our education majors also need to take this Gen 104 class before they go into their Math 4 elementary ed and those types of courses. But this goes more into the intermediate algebra, such as quadratic equations, complex fractions, rational equations, things like that. So just a brief overview of the Emporium model. Whether you're face-to-face, online, or hybrid, you can use a lot of elements of this. If you're not currently using it, we've really had a lot of success with it and really enjoyed it. It is to be an Emporium model class, you need to be computer-based with fully integrated instructional courseware. But there should be a personalized curriculum. We use the term self-accelerated rather than self-paced. We do use pacing guides to help students plan and see kind of the slowest case scenario that they can go and still finish everything in time. They shouldn't go slower than that pace, but they are welcome to go faster than that pace, can actually finish the course early. There's no lecturing. Lectures are replaced with courseware learning aids, on-demand assistance, and other resources. In Hawks, this is essentially the learn mode, is really, really helpful here to get students started. And then the on-demand assistance would be tutors and instructors in class or online, some synchronously, either through like Microsoft Teams or just actually in person. There needs to be ongoing assessment and feedback. This is where the courseware is really helpful, because on all the practice problems and so forth, students get a lot of instant feedback. No waiting for me to grade it, thankfully, because sometimes that takes a little while. They need to be actively learning and doing the work, not just watching us. And we use a mastery learning model, which is really, really important. Our mastery learning score for Our current classes, we have everything set to 80%, and then they need to earn a 70% or greater on the final exam, but they can take certifies and such as many times as they need to. Now in times of COVID, where everything is online, we are using a time on task policy rather than an attendance policy. You kind of have to figure out what works best for you. We've had a lot more success with the time on task policy using the reports than Hawks to monitor progress. And we do a lot of monitoring of progress. All of our instructors are required to fill out a progress log. It's pretty in-depth, but pretty doable. I'd say about 1 hour per course of 25 students a week. Just checking through all the reporting, if they're ahead of pace, behind pace, how many minutes they're in the system, if we note any suspicious activity, such as, 10 lessons getting done in 20 minutes or something like that, if they're behind on a test, and so forth. So those have been really helpful to keep track of everybody. And we do plan of action meetings where we'll actually meet with a student either in person or typically over Microsoft Teams these days to make a plan, talk about what's going on, and see if they need any other assistance outside of the course. Why? Sorry. Okay, so other features of our intervention courses. We do use graduate assistants and professional staff to teach our courses. Peer tutors are embedded in all of our classes. This is why it's really, really important for us to be very close to our Math Resource Center. We use the same tutors. We train them the same way, and they have all the same expectations and policies and procedures. So that's really, really helpful. We typically in person try to have a ratio of 3 staff in a room of 30 students, which now we're only allowed to have 20 students in a classroom. And so we'll have 1 staff and 1 tutor. Students have the opportunity to finish the course early. We've had a lot of students already finish. And there are a few students who finished Gen 103 so fast that they were able to start a half semester Gen 104 course, and they're going to take both courses in 1 semester. So for them, they had to pass the final exam by March 2nd to start Gen 104 on March 3rd, I think, something like that. So every semester we get not a huge group, but enough students that it's definitely worthwhile to continue our half semester Gen 104 course. If a student returns to us, so either they took the course and didn't pass and they need to come back, and they at least made it to the midterm on their first try, we let them start back at the midterm so that they can spend a little more time on some of the harder material where they maybe got tripped up. Another way to be a returner for us is if you pass Gen 103, you get to start at the midterm of 104 because there is overlap in the 2 courses. So we remove any overlapping courses because they've obviously just done them and don't make them do them again. So that's a really great incentive for students. If they start with a shorter list of lessons to do, they can finish the course early, and a lot of students take us up on that opportunity. And just, we were already using online courseware for years and years, but that really made our transition to fully online and hybrid classes a lot smoother because those things were already set up. They're already built by the experts, and we could focus on policies and procedures and student concerns and things like that, and weren't bogged down with, grading and trying to invent the wheel. So that made a huge help for us in our transition. So currently we're offering fully online and hybrid classes. About half of our population is currently in fully online, maybe a little more than half, and the other half is in the hybrid courses. Fully online classes are asynchronous with us, which it's been helpful to have that learn mode in Hawks because they can watch the videos and the notes and all those things whenever is convenient for them. We, as like everybody, we have a lot of students working strange hours and a lot of hours and have a lot of commitments, especially now. So we have an asynchronous class there, but we do have synchronous opportunities, meaning instructor virtual office hours. We're available by appointment if those don't work. We have the drop-in online tutoring that Tyler told you about. That's been really helpful, because if they're working and they need help now, and we're open, they can get help now. Otherwise, we'll do our best to help them outside of those hours if we can. Otherwise, we'll schedule a time during hours. In our hybrid classes, we capped these at 20 students. For us, that was completely determined by the physical distancing capacity of our classroom, which was determined to be 20. So we did not over-enroll a single one of those because we couldn't. We no longer have an attendance policy. We only do time on task. We kept it very simple. Our class typically would meet like Monday, Wednesday for 50 minutes each day. So they need to have at least 100 minutes per week in Hawks. Students are not required to come in. Some of them, might not feel safe coming in right now, or they signed up for a hybrid and decided later, oh no, I really don't want to be on campus. So we're not forcing anybody's hand. Nobody has to come on campus, but they do have to get that time in Hawks. So that's how we've been tracking students and reaching out to them. And a lot of students need more than that to stay on pace, which is why we don't just check time, we check progress. We currently don't have any penalties in place for not coming to class or not hitting the time on task goal, other than the student just falling behind and putting themselves, in a less than ideal situation. But for right now, there's no penalty in place. Formerly, we had a very strict attendance policy where pre-COVID, where you could actually fail the course due to, missing X number of times, which was pretty generous, but there's nothing like that in place now. We have student workstations marked every other seat. We were pretty low tech and just laminated colored paper and stuck it to the screen with a Velcro dot. And that's actually worked really well. So let's say the 11 o'clock class sits at the red computers. Then when they leave, we can clean those. And, as the next class, the noon class was coming in, they would sit at the green computers. And that way it helped us turn the classroom around with cleaning workstations in between students. Almost all lessons and tests can be done online. The only exception to this would be our pre-assessment test, because we wanted to proctor that in person. We're thinking about some options for that in the fall. But right now, our final exam is in Hawks, and it is proctored with Respondus Monitor through Blackboard. That's a change for us. We used to give our final in Blackboard because of the Respondus Monitor, but our Hawks rep showed us a way that we could use Hawks, and it's much better. We've had the early finishers test with that, and it's been wonderful. Julia, I can't see the questions. Is there anything I should address now? Or I saw a hand up. Let me see.
So I know Tyler's been answering some of the questions.
Okay.
He's actually answering one now. I don't know if you want to go ahead and address that live.
Okay. Can we share the slides? Yes, we absolutely can. If a student has already taken Gen 103 and moves on to Gen 104, does that mean they're redoing material in the first half of Gen 104? So we eliminate the overlap so students don't have to redo any lessons. They basically, our Gen 103 stops at chapter 5 of the book we use, and Gen 104 picks up in half semester. Gen 104 just picks up in chapter 6, so that they don't have to redo anything. Do students pay twice to cover both courses? It depends on their situation. We have everybody basically sign a form that they know it's their responsibility to check with financial aid. In a lot of cases, if they've already capped the full-time enrollment status, there isn't an additional fee, but sometimes there is if they're part-time or depending on how they're funded. So that's a case-by-case basis that we leave in the hands of financial aid to explain to them, because we don't have any access to that, but potentially, usually not though. They do get 6 credits though if they do both classes in one semester. So that's really good. Okay. So I will move on from there. Here are some of our pass rates, kind of pre-COVID, just to show the Emporium model, kind of the power of the Emporium model. We typically had around a 70% pass rate. The spikes are typically summer, smaller courses. A lot of times our students, just anecdotally, I know a lot of them are only taking our class if they're taking us in the summer, so they're a little more focused. So that might explain that a little bit. Our 2020 pass rates were lower than usual, which we kind of expected. We had a lot of structure in place to make these things happen here, to get the 70%. And, we just obviously couldn't maintain those structures during COVID. So, and obviously people had additional challenges. So our pass rates were lower than that. Okay, Tyler.
All right, so in this next kind of section, I wanted to talk about some of the lessons that we learned in fall of 2020, so we can kind of share that with you, and then maybe even get some of your feedback at the end. So the challenges, some of these are kind of specific to our kind of space that we have to work in, and you might obviously have challenges of your own. But some of the things that we were kind of faced with, well, obviously, it can be difficult at times to maintain that physical distance while you're tutoring. Tutoring can be kind of personal. Oftentimes you're pointing over people's shoulder or near them, checking their work. So it is hard to maintain that physical distancing while tutoring. There's also an increased need for staff to monitor things that we didn't quite have to monitor before. So we need to make sure that, because we're a drop-in center, students could come in at really time and any time really. So we need to make sure that we're never going over that physical distancing capacity. We also need to monitor our entrance and exits. We have an entrance door and an exit door that are marked specifically. So we're typically trying to make sure that people are using those. And also every time a student leaves the table that they were working at, a staff member comes by and disinfects that space. So it does just kind of require all this extra monitoring, making sure the people in the room or how many people are in the room, that you're cleaning often. It can be a lot of extra monitoring that wasn't there before. Another challenge is beforehand, where we had all our staff work in person. It was very easy to know, of course, that they're paying attention, looking for questions. But online, obviously, we're not in their living room with them to make sure that they're actually working. So we kind of had to go by, how quickly they're responding to questions is our main indicator. Another challenge that kind of presents itself when you're working online is that a lot of times in our physical space, students would work in groups. So if the group had a question, it could be answered once. Everybody can kind of listen along to the tutor. But in an online setting, a lot of times people aren't necessarily working together. So we have a much lower practical capacity. It's hard to group people together by class when they're just all kind of working from home. So that is a challenge there, because really it is difficult to handle even 5 questions that come in quickly with the staff that we have online. Another kind of challenge for our math center specifically is that a lot of times professional staff or veteran tutors would be around if there were ever a kind of difficult problem that comes in that the first tutor who sees it doesn't know how to solve. They could work collaboratively with other tutors or professional staff in the room. That gets a little harder when you're working online, just because you have to message somebody, call them in to the call, and someone's not always there for you to turn to. So those were the kind of issues that we had in our math tutoring center that we needed to address. So here's kind of the lessons we learned. A lot of these are responses to those issues. So you definitely need extra support for tutors who are working online, especially those who are new. So the kind of support we gave there, we incorporated online training into our training before the semester. We also created a series of review sheets where each of our most popular classes, we looked at the syllabi for those, wrote down the topics that they were covering that week, and then we would work a few example problems and post those into our MRC tutoring team so that our tutors could access those. We also kind of, to combat that less efficient tutoring, we need extra staff during those peak hours. So professional staff are kind of working to monitor a lot more than they might, necessarily have to pre-COVID. Also, we're staffing extra people online just to be safe, since it is difficult to handle any sudden influx of tutors. Another lesson we learned, and I imagine most of you are experiencing this at your own university, overall usage is definitely down compared to normal semesters. So this our response to that was increased advertising and collaboration with the math department. We're working with the math department to do some in-house advertising for us, and also make sure that our tutoring center link is loaded into all of our supported classes. Another lesson is, this one kind of speaks to how you can maintain the physical distance. It is good if you have whiteboards along your wall, to kind of move your tables closer to the edge. Just allows you both to kind of space out the room a bit, but also you can really make use of whiteboards along the wall so tutors can kind of stand away. We also have rolling whiteboards that tutors can roll over, so they don't necessarily have to sit down next to the student to work out a problem. It's also good to staff veteran tutors online when possible. It is difficult, just with how much content we cover in our math center, to have new tutors there who we aren't necessarily sure are comfortable with the material yet. So it is good to staff mainly veteran tutors. And then also it's good for professional staff to kind of take note of the average response times to ensure that our tutors aren't, busy with their own homework while they're on the clock and not answering questions. So each of the professional staff, we have all these Teams notifications on as well, so we can kind of see how quickly our tutors are responding to each of these questions. So we kind of were facing a separate set of challenges in the Gen 103, 104 classroom, just because, we have a different need. It's a different student population. It's developmental math students, and it's a classroom environment as opposed to a drop-in. So again, I'm sure many of you have experienced this, but without our attendance policy, we did have much lower attendance for in-person class sessions. And it is, of course, difficult to enforce that policy. It's very easy or you'll definitely generate complaints if you are forcing people to come in a pandemic, and we realized that wasn't tenable pretty early. Decreased student engagement has been a major problem. Just with the pandemic, it can be hard to kind of make sure that your students are actively engaging with the material when you don't see them often in class. So that was definitely a challenge across the board, just lower engagement with the material. And then, as we were kind of answering, or a question I answered earlier, do we proctor our tests? We don't proctor tests along the way, the cumulative tests that we give our students. We proctor our final exam using Respondus Lockdown Monitor, but the passwords have been removed from the test, and that obviously raises the possibility of cheating. It's a lot harder to cheat when you're in our math lab, but when you're at home, of course, you have access to PhotoMath or whatever app you might use in the internet. And of course, proctoring software is not 100% effective. I know you might have experienced that yourself, but a lot of times you can only really see from the neck up on some of these Respondus videos. So it's difficult to know what the student might be using in terms of resources out of your view of the camera. Some more challenges, of course, with contact tracing at the university. A lot of times, even if it's not our own tutors who are getting or testing positive for COVID, it could be their roommate or a family member. So we would have, anytime a tutor would be contacted by health services here at U of L, they could be out for up to 2 weeks. So that would cause kind of prolonged staffing shortages we might not necessarily experience usually. And it can be difficult as well to reach out to students who might have fallen off the map and aren't attending class. Typically, once students begin falling behind, we'd like to meet with them and develop a plan to get caught back up, but that gets difficult to do when they won't even respond to the request for a meeting. Also, there's no way to guarantee that these students are actually getting these class communications. We can track views on Blackboard, but we can't necessarily see if they're reading each of these emails. So we aren't really sure if this information is getting to students who don't often come to class. And then, of course, with the increased cleaning requirements, we did have the challenge, at least at first, of cleaning the computers between the classes, which we kind of resolved with our labeling system.
Thank you. And you can kind of see in that picture our red laminated square to mark that workstation. And you can kind of see we have little like plastic keyboard covers kind of in the bottom of the screen there. That has helped make it a little easier to clean. You don't have to worry about getting in the nooks and crannies of a keyboard, which would be kind of impossible. So we've been using those, and that's been really helpful, and they've lasted quite a while between having to replace them. And just one extra note about plan of action meetings, I meant to say earlier, we had such a hard time in the fall trying to actually get students to like meet with us synchronously, even for like a 5 to 10 minute check-in, over Teams. It was just really, really difficult. So this semester, we've tried a new process and it seems to be working a lot better. And we've created a Microsoft form that asks like the good check-in questions that like I really want to know first, like how are you doing emotionally, physically, like emotionally, physically, mentally, like how's your mental health? Is there, are there outside factors affecting you? Do you need to be connected to campus resources? Because as you know, a lot of our students, this is not a priority because, they have a lot of other things going on and that's why they've fallen behind. And then it gets into kind of the math questions like, are you aware that like you have these resources? And then they basically have to request an extension on a cumulative test. We do have those lockout after the deadline. So that has been really helpful because students can access that at any time. Shriver, our Hawks rep, helped show me a way that we can put a link to that. It's like a tab right in Hawks. So, they have like lessons, web tests, to-do list, test extension. And when they click the tab, it opens the form. And that's been a lot more efficient. And students are actually willing to share quite a bit on that form. And then if there's anything concerning, I'll reach out either via email at first or try to look up their numbers in the systems and give them a phone call. So that's actually been a lot more helpful than trying to actually meet with them over Teams. So I thought I'd share that.
Yeah, and I'll kind of go through these quickly. I realize that we're getting close to our time here. But here are some of the lessons we learned, of course, from fall 2020 that we tried to implement in the spring. Like we mentioned, a time on task policy definitely beats out an attendance policy. Attendance policy just opens a can of worms, and it's very difficult to make students come to campus, especially during a pandemic. It is good to use reporting features that are in Hawks, such as time per lesson, time per student. That is good to monitor at least weekly, but preferably more often so you can detect cheating as early as possible. You don't want students to make it a long way and that go unnoticed for a couple of weeks, because then it gets a little bit harder to uncredit some of those lessons. With test proctoring, we've realized that instructions must be very clear. If there is a way to misinterpret something, our students usually find a way to do it. So everything has to be clear. We have pictures, walk them through step by step. We also built in a practice test so students can test their equipment for compatibility with Respondus. I know for some schools, Respondus has issues with Chromebooks or sometimes with tablets. So we definitely have that practice test there so they can kind of ensure that their equipment works beforehand. It's good to include those requirements in the syllabus as well if you haven't. Make it very clear from the outset exactly what they'll need in order to take a test in this class. Also, if you use Respondus, you probably have already kind of realized this, but the flags from the proctoring software don't really correlate with actual cheating too often. A lot of times students will get flagged for things like being out of the frame or bad internet connection. It doesn't necessarily mean the student is cheating. It could just mean sometimes it's completely random, it seems, why they flag them. It's not entirely sure. Sometimes we'll have students who we overhear kind of devising a plan to cheat, and they weren't flagged at all. So it's always good to watch each of those videos carefully.
Especially the environment video. That's usually where we find a lot, you know, where they're showing the room. Sometimes you catch a friend in the space.
Also, it's good to use a syllabus quiz. So, you know, like we said, we can't really ensure that our students are reading these class communications, reading their syllabus. So before they can begin completing assignments, we have them do a syllabus quiz to make sure that they understand the policies of the class. We just built that using the web test builder and Hawks. Like Kelly mentioned, we used a Microsoft form to develop that survey to replace most of our plan of action meetings, except those that really are kind of dire situations. We use that deadline extension request form to check in with students, as Kelly mentioned earlier as well. We also have kind of increased this semester our communication with other campus partners and student success to make sure that we're reaching out to students and, you know, contacting them, ensuring that these students have the resources they need. So we've, you know, used text, phone calls, spoke with advisors, a lot of different things to make sure that we kind of get these students in who might be falling behind. And then another lesson is, you know, of course, that no solution is going to be perfect. It's not a normal semester, and there's really nothing you can do to make things, you know, flow as efficiently as they might have before the pandemic. There's going to be some percentage of students that don't engage at all, and there's really not a, you know, ready-made solution for every problem. So you can't be necessarily too hard on yourself.
So I'm going to skip this stuff because and then Tyler, did you want to mention this real quick, and then we'll get to some questions?
Yeah, so the previous slides were results, which just kind of we had over the years, but this is a particular result that we're proud of. You know, in math education, sometimes there's that, you know, gap between different students, and we have actually, in our program, we were able to eliminate the kind of gap based on ethnicity. So you can kind of see our pass rates there, very even across the board without, you know, major statistical deviation between different groups. So we are proud about that one. And here's some additional stats you can look at once we share our slides.
Okay, so let me see.
I apologize for interrupting. We only have a few more minutes.
Okay.
Jump into the Q&A.
So with our classes, and this is kind of between us and the math department, they have to pass the final exam in order to pass the course. Somebody asked about percentage of overall grade because we're not proctoring asynchronous classes. So technically, they just have to pass their cumulative tests, no matter how many times it takes, even in an unproctored environment, in order to gain access to the final exam. So technically, it doesn't count towards their grade at all because everything hinges on the final exam. And yeah, there's so little control over it right now. We don't know if somebody's actually not taking it or not. That's why it's really important for us, because there's so much at stake with the final, to have that proctored. And if a student does have a Chromebook and it's not compatible, I'll proctor them by Teams, and I'll just watch them, you know, through their phone while they take it or something, but nobody takes it without a camera or human eyes watching them. Role or responsibility of embedded tutors. So they just need to circulate around the classroom and ask students if they have any questions, or just watch their screen and see if they're continuously getting questions wrong, and offer help. You know, in this case, kind of standing back. We have large whiteboards that they can use. Tyler, do you want to take the advertising question?
Yes, so a little bit about our advertising. We use our system, CardSmart technology is what we have it here at U of L. We send emails to every single class that we have support for, giving links to our different tutoring service. We've also sent emails to each member of the math department who teaches a supported course. So they actually announce that in class and hopefully add our link to their Blackboard shell. We also have a Reach social media page that we put information up, and also kind of our hours on the TV around in our Belknap Academic Building. We have our information placed on the TVs throughout the building as well.
And watching videos, no, we don't watch the whole video for each student, but they are individual videos of each student. So we jump around and watch. We look at flags, but usually that doesn't mean anything. The environment video in several places throughout, kind of spot checking. So we plan about 5 minutes per student to review them without like watching the whole thing. And that's worked pretty well for us. Like I said, that environment video is typically pretty telling, because sometimes I think they don't realize they're being recorded yet. Like they've given access, you know, to their computer to access their microphone and camera, but I think they don't think they're being recorded until they actually start the exam.
Yeah, there's a pre-exam portion in there that it's quite clear that some of them don't know, because they'll be kind of discussing their plan with their friend who's helping them. You know, they might say, yeah, write the answers down here on this piece of paper, and then we'll overhear them, and then we definitely know to investigate further.
Any other questions or hands?
So it looks like we are out of questions, and we're actually out of time as well. Thank you, Kelly and Tyler, for sharing this valuable information with us today. I'm going to launch a quick 3-question poll to share your feedback regarding the current presentation. So if you could just take your time and go through the poll just to give your opinions on that feedback. Additionally, we will have a next concurrent session at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can view the chat for session meeting room links or access the conference website for a complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to talk with the Hawks representative one-on-one. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.